the .22 long rifle as a carry option. Personal protection gun, concealed carry gun, and some data obtained through ballistics gel tests. Thanks to God Almighty, the patrons that gave monetary and suggestions on what they wanted, we have this to talk about today. With that, welcome to Gunfighter Life Podcast, the podcast where we talk about guns, tactics, ballistics, personal protection, the right way, with God Almighty at the center, biblical Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience on that military, law enforcement, private security contracting, competition shooting, firearms instruction, hunting, and some other stuff, bio bullet points in the show notes. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and fingers for battle. First of all, I said personal protection because that's like a common term, but I actually don't like that term now that I think about it. I disagree with that. You should be as equally concerned about protecting others as you are personal protection, right? Because you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Perhaps we should call it a life-preserving firearm, although that might be confused with a life preserver. But it pretty much does the same thing, protects life, right? Whether it's a life jacket, a fire extinguisher, or a handgun on your hip, it's to preserve life. It's a life preserver. With that, today's episode, .22 long rifle for carry. I've talked about this before. This is not me telling you to carry a .22 long rifle. I don't carry a .22 long rifle. The vast majority of the time, I carry a full-size fighting handgun and a proper center fire caliber on my hip like a man. I don't, wiener carry pointed at my genitals, a little tiny baby .380 or 22 long rifle or whatever else as a primary carry method. I'm telling you to carry a full-size fighting handgun and a center fire caliber. That said, some people will carry a .22 long rifle. My wife carries a .22 long rifle as her go-to carry gun. I don't expect my wife to be as dedicated as you should be as a man to protecting society. Men and women are different. Call me crazy. But you as a man carry a full-size fighting handgun. But for whatever reason, maybe you're past that age where you can handle a center fire handgun, or you're, let's say, going hunting with a large caliber center fire rifle, but you want a .22 handgun as kind of a small game getting tool. And if you had to use it for defense, because you're hunting with a single shot rifle or a bolt action or something, it might be pressed into that service. In the case of my wife, we live on a shooting range. Like, I have a range in my yard. I'm blessed that I can go out and practice. I can, reload and try a load out on my rifle and walk a few feet and test that load out. I can train, defensive handgun tactics in my front yard on purpose, right? I live where I live for a reason, for many reasons, but that's one of them. Population density matters for a lot of reasons. But I'm pretty dedicated to the craft, as you might imagine. Right, I'm still a professional gunfighter as my bread and butter trade, what I do for a living. Not everybody is as dedicated. I'm much more confident in my wife carrying a .22 long rifle handgun that she likes to shoot and enjoys shooting and will shoot more and practices with more and is very accurate with it. And I'm much more comfortable with her carrying that than I am with her carrying a Smith & Wesson J-frame, which I don't mind a Smith & Wesson J-frame. I will carry them as a backup gun, but I've had my wife shoot those. She can't stand shooting those. She doesn't like those. She's not going to practice with those. So that's a worse gun for her, even though ballistically it's better than a .22 long rifle. So this is not me telling you to carry a .22 long rifle for defense. What I am telling you is .22 long rifle is absolutely a deadly round. It can kill you. It is certainly deadly. my main qualm with the 22 long rifle is not that it's not powerful enough or whatever. My main qualm with it is it's not as reliable. And I don't care how reliable you say your rimfire handgun is, it's not as reliable as a centerfire. I mean, you could find me like the worst centerfire, like some old Tokarov or something that's rusted out. But a good quality centerfire handgun is in general going to be more reliable than a 22 long rifle handgun. For a main reason of 22 long rifle is rimfire. They put that priming compound in there and it has to get everywhere in the rim. If it misses a spot in the rim, if the gun works properly and it hits the wrong spot in the rim, which is out of your control, the gun is not going to go off. It's not going to discharge, which is a thing. If you get good quality, and we're talking defense, right? If you get, or fighting, if you get good fighting ammunition, defensive ammunition, and you get 1,000 rounds of 9mm or 45 ACP of good defensive rounds like Spear Gold Dot, Winchester Ranger, and you get even good 22 long rifle ammunition, and you get 1,000 rounds of each, and you shoot 1,000 rounds of each, you're going to get almost certainly more failures to fire, more issues, more failures to feed, things like that, because the bullets get bent, the brass is much softer, not softer, but thinner, smaller, easier to bend and dent. You're going to have more issues, almost certainly, unless you have some weird problem going on with your gun, with the rimfire than the center fire. And when your life's on the line or somebody else's life is on the line, right, you should love your neighbor as yourself, that's a big deal. The gun actually going off is more important to me than the actual ballistic effectiveness of said cartridge. So that is my main concern with carrying 22 long rifle as a, let's say, fighting option. That said, it's certainly effective. It certainly can be effective, and it's certainly a deadly round. Now, again, getting back to thanks first and foremost to God always, because I couldn't record a single podcast or take another breath without him. I certainly couldn't do any of the other stuff without him either. Thanks to God. And then the patrons, I took some Patreon money and I bought some ballistics gel. I had you guys vote on things you might want, and ballistics gel came up on top. So I bought some ballistics gel, and I asked you guys what you wanted. One of the ideas that came up was rimfire, testing different rimfire ammo. And I didn't do exactly the Patreon suggestion, but it was pretty close. I tested different rimfire ammo out of a rifle and different carry loads out of a handgun. The Patreon wanted me to shoot cheap bulk ammo to see how that did ballistically, but if it's for defense, I'm not a big fan of that because, again, my primary concern is not the ballistics performance. My primary concern is that going off in the cheap bulk pack ammo is made to be just that, cheap, right? I'm not going to dog on Remington Golden Bullet. I think actually Remington ammo has gotten really good lately. And their Golden Bullet is not bad for a bulk 22 ammo. That said, I get several misfires, several failures to fire out of every bucket that I go through of ammo, and a bucket is 1,400 rounds. I'm not telling you not to get Golden Bullet ammo, Remington Golden Bullet. I'm not telling you not to get it. I'm not telling you not to shoot it. I'm not telling you not to have fun with it and hunt prairie dogs with it and, do whatever else with it. Teach new shooters with it. Train with it so you can learn how to deal with failures to fire. But I don't know that I would recommend it as a carry ammo. I don't think Remington recommends it as a carry ammo because it's meant to be cheap bulk ammo. I wouldn't tell you to carry cheap bulk ammo in your 9mm. I certainly wouldn't do it in your 22. So, even if it expanded well and performed well ballistically, it's not as reliable. It's not meant to be reliable. It's meant to be cheap. So if you're going to carry 22, even good 22 is not expensive compared to centerfire ammo. So, jump up from the 3 to 4 cents a round to the 10 cents a round and get really good 22 ammo or whatever. But so I don't, even if Remington Golden Bullet does well, and it probably does, the hollow point Golden Bullet probably does expand when it goes off, but I'm not as confident that it's going to do that or have feeding issues because, some of those bullets are loose in the case, literally. It's cheap bulk ammo, and it's good for that, but I wouldn't recommend that as a carry ammo, so I'm not going to test it as a carry ammo. But I did test some common loads. I did test C.C.I. Mini Mag, which I consider like the gold standard for rimfire ammo. Maybe not the best, but one of the best commonly available ammunitions in .22, and I find it to be pretty good in a broad spectrum of firearms. Is it Olympic grade match accurate? No, but we're not talking about Olympic grade match accurate, right? If you want to get your Anschutz and compete in the Olympics, this is not the ammo you're going to use. Talking about commonly available, what I would consider like a really good gold standard for .22 long rifle. I found it to work really well in hunting and shooting, and just, it's a good load. So I tested it. I tested it in a Ruger 10/22, and I tested it in my wife's carry gun, which is a Smith & Wesson M&P 22 Compact. Actually got that gun for me, and she shot it, and now it's her carry gun, which I'm super happy with. I'm glad that she carries it. Now, the barrel length I looked up on that is 3.6 inches, and obviously the barrel on a Ruger 10/22 carbine is right around 16 inches. It might be like 16 point something, so they don't get too close with the NFA or whatever, but it's right around 16 inches, a carbine length. I shot both of these. I got a chronograph. Again, thanks to the patrons. I've had chronographs in the past. I generally don't care that much. I'll just get my data the old-fashioned way, like actually shooting. But they wanted a chronograph. They asked about a chronograph, so thank you guys for contributing to the chronograph. I shot over the chronograph with the 10/22, and I wrote it all down, but I don't want to get all nerded out ballistically today on exact numbers. It was right around 1,200 feet a second. It was somewhere a little over, somewhere a little under with the Ruger 10/22 with the C.C.I. Mini Mags, 1,200 feet a second out of the carbine. And that's the 16-inch barrel. Out of the 3.6-inch M&P Compact, it was right around 1,000. It was very close to 1,000 feet a second. So you lost 200 feet a second. That's actually much less than I was thinking. Much less, I believe, than you would have lost in a center fire cartridge, like a 223. But 200 feet a second is still something. So I shot both of these into a ballistics block. Not at any great distance, right? Because this is for fighting, for protection, and that generally happens at fairly close ranges. Not always. I'm not the guy that says you only need to be able to shoot at 3 yards. I think you should be able to shoot much further than that and push yourself and be a good marksman. But I shot it at pretty close range at the gel block. Now, I shot the block with both the carbine and the handgun. The carbine penetrated to a depth of about 10.5 inches, and the handgun to a depth of about 9.5 inches. And both mushroomed very well, very close to what you would expect, like a good-looking mushroomed bullet. So even in the handgun, it was plenty of velocity to get that to mushroom. It didn't just start to mushroom, it mushroomed very well. They both did. I'm going to be honest, I'm pretty surprised by those results. I would have thought that the carbine would have gotten much better ballistics. It didn't it got marginally better ballistics. Now, the advantages of a carbine over a handgun are many more over just the ballistics, right? A carbine is much easier to shoot. I could take a 12-year-old girl and have her shooting a silhouette target at 50 yards pretty reliably in an afternoon that has never shot a gun before. Most, and I say this as somebody that's a law enforcement instructor and F.B.I. certified and F.B.I. handgun instructor, most law enforcement officers can't reliably hit a silhouette target at 50 yards with their duty gun, with a handgun. So carbines are much easier to shoot. Right, for somebody that's not going to shoot very much and train, it takes a lot more training to be proficient with a handgun than a carbine. So if you're looking for, I don't know if I should suggest this, but if you're looking for a home defense type gun and a .22 is all you can handle and all you're going to use, I'd still recommend the carbine over the handgun. So there are more advantages than just ballistically. But ballistically, the handgun was a lot closer to the carbine than I would have thought. But they both did okay. Now, the F.B.I. generally recommends, 12 to 16 inches of penetration. Neither one of these rounds made that. Neither one got there. But we're talking about, they want that for a center fire duty gun. These are not that. Oh, I should mention also, this is the clear ballistics gel. This is not ordnance gel. I don't really want the ordnance gel because it's much harder to work with. But the clear ballistics gel, it got between 10.5 it got 10.5 for the carbine and around 9.5. These are rough numbers for the handgun. Both expanded well, both did about the same amount of damage in the wound channel. One went a little bit further. So, with that in mind, I went and tried a couple of other loads. I grabbed some other loads that I got for my wife's carry gun. C.C.I. Stinger. I shot the C.C.I. Stinger. That's a 32 grain loaded quite a bit hotter, going much faster. I shot it in the block out of the handgun and it penetrated less. And this is nothing, I've talked about this many times, but in case you have not heard it, you have to bear with the speech here. But there's a balancing act when it comes to, hollow point ammunition, defensive ammunition, expanding ammunition. There's a balancing act between penetration and expansion. The more rapidly something expands, the less it's going to penetrate. So the more power something has with a given expanding projectile, likely the less it's going to penetrate. How can that be? Because when you drive it faster, it opens up faster. And when you increase the diameter of something, that decreases its ability to penetrate. Right? The wider something is, the harder it is to shove through something. Think about if I have the same amount of force on a pencil, right? And I stab you in the arm with a pencil. Same amount of force. I stab you first with the blunt end, the eraser end of the pencil. Probably not going to do much. And I turn around and go to the old school grinding pencil sharpener, right? And I stab you with the same amount of force with the pointy end of the pencil. It's going to penetrate a lot more because it's got less surface area on the point. All right, when a bullet starts to expand, it goes from like a round point or a fairly small point at the end of the bullet. When it expands, you increase the diameter, it's harder to shove through something. So the C.C.I. Mini Mag, not surprising to me, but to somebody new to ballistics, it might be surprising that it did not penetrate nearly as much. Significantly less than the C.C.I. Mini Mag. Then I got, and it's worth pointing out, these loads are not marketed for defense. These loads are marketed for actually varmints. They say right on the box, varmint. And I should also point out for those, these were the hollow point C.C.I. Mini Mags. I don't think they make a solid Stinger. But the C.C.I. Mini Mags, they make two different flavors, right? They make the full metal jacket, or it's not even a full metal jacket, it's like a copper wash, but a non-hollow point and a hollow point. I tested the hollow points. And then I tested some Federal Punch. Federal Punch is, you can look up the specs on it, but it is branded as a carry kind of defensive 22 long rifle ammunition, which is something fairly new. It's not new to carry a 22 long rifle. People have been doing that for a long time, but to have a dedicated, advertised as, defensive load for a 22, that is fairly new. I got some of these Federal Punches. I've shot them out of my wife's handgun. Obviously, you got to make sure they cycle and work, right? So I have tested them in the past. I shot one of those through the gel block. Now, these are not hollow point ammunition, but they are flat-fronted, which I like. They're pretty light for caliber, even light for 22 caliber, and they're 30-something-ish grains, whereas in the light, they might even be 20-something grains. They're light for caliber. I shot one of these into the block, and it penetrated all the way through the 16-inch block and kept going. Now, that's not surprising either because it's not a hollow point. It did a bit of damage. I would say not as much in the wound channel. Didn't appear to be as much in the wound channel as the C.C.I. Mini Mag. But it did penetrate farther. So this brings up the old thing, like especially when you get the marginal calibers. And yes, the 22 long rifle is certainly deadly, but it is a marginal caliber for defense. When you get to proper fighting handgun caliber, like a 9mm or a 45 ACP, you don't really have to choose. You can get enough expansion and enough penetration. But when you start getting into marginal calibers, you kind of have to choose. Do you want more penetration or do you want more expansion? And we run into that quandary here. So which one do you want? Do you want more expansion, more disruption of tissue in the short term, or do you want more penetration? I shouldn't say enough, because you shoot somebody in the right place, you need very little penetration. But if you have to go through at a weird angle, their upper arm, their forearm, depending on what they're doing to you, and their rib, and get in and do enough damage to stop them from doing what they're doing, do you want to make sure you have adequate penetration? Which one of those do you want? You kind of have to choose. And you should choose for you and your circumstances. I'll tell you what I did. I brought the gel block into my wife, had her look at it, and asked her to choose. Now, I would encourage you to consider becoming a patron. They help support the podcast, obviously. And I did video. I did video content on this and on the gel test, and you can see video of what it does to the block, and you can see, me talking about it and reviewing it. I just put out that video on Patreon today. There's a lot of content on Patreon. There's a lot of just special content that only patrons are going to get. I don't really have a desire to be a dancing monkey on YouTube and or TikTok or wherever they post stuff. I'm not even on the social media stuff. And I stopped watching YouTube I stopped watching YouTube altogether, and specifically gun stuff caused me to get off there because of all the gun tube glitterati, just freaking out about a SIG 320 and pretending like it was unsafe and that it was going to be a hand grenade in your hand, and just all the ridiculousness on that, and them drilling holes in it and pushing the sear off of the the mechanism and making, no crap, no surprise that it went off. That's what it does. When you have a sear slip, when you push a sear off what's holding the sear and it cause the firing pin to go forward, the gun's going to go off. No kidding. 1911s, the original 1911s, they haven't been drop safe since jump. It's a good thing that our forefathers weren't gun tubers, emoting about how unsafe things are, because we probably never would have went to war and be ruled by the Nazis because our 1911s weren't drop safe. I don't know. It just made me fed up with the whole gun tube scene. So I'm not on YouTube anymore, and I don't plan on posting anything on there anytime soon. But if you want content like that, go to Patreon. If you want a bunch of other insider content, go to Patreon. I'm not interested in the clickbaity type stuff. If you want to watch a bunch of dudes, shoot, cantaloupes filled with N.R.A, I'm not putting that down. That's cool. That's entertainment. If you want to watch that, have fun. That's not really my scene. There's plenty of people out there making content just for fun and entertainment, and that's great. I started the podcast because I've been blessed with a lot of real-world first-hand experience, and I'm not putting anybody else down. That content is great and very entertaining. But you feel that I bring some real-world first-hand experience to the firearms content, whether that be in defensive use or hunting. Hopefully you value the content. If you do value it, or you want some of the extra insider-only Patreon content, consider becoming a patron. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. And again, that other content is fine. There's plenty of it out there. So I'm not telling you not to watch that stuff. But if you like this content and you want to support it, one of the things that I think that keeps it honest is I don't take sponsors. I refuse sponsors. I consider that bribery. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but I consider it bribery. I can't see how it's otherwise. And you shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the wise and twists the words of the righteous. It doesn't say of the crooked, of the greedy. It says the wise and the righteous. You're taking money from a gun company, from an ammo company, from a cheap Chinese optics company. It's probably going to skew what you say, whether you want it to or not, right? Because that's what the Bible says, twist the eyes of the wise. It blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. So, again, if you appreciate the content and not having corporate sponsors and being just another, podcast to push a product or a company's thing, you should, if you feel led to, you should support that kind of content, whether it's me or somebody else. It could be anybody else that's making content and not taking sponsors. Anyway, there should be a Patreon link in the show notes. And by all means, if you're struggling to feed your family, you can't afford $5 a month, by all means, please continue to listen to the podcast for free and don't feel guilty about it at all. With that, how about your tactical tip of the day? 22s especially can get filthy. Why? Because we tend to shoot them a lot because the ammunition is cheap, right? And it also can tend to be pretty dirty burning ammunition. One thing you may not think about for gun cleaning is simple green. Now don't take like your optic and dunk it in simple green, but something like a bolt carrier group off of like a 1022 that just gets filthy. You can just let that sit in simple green for a while. Can be pretty good at breaking up the carbon and stuff like that, and it's much cheaper than like buying an entire dunk tank full of solvent. And be careful what you put it on. I wouldn't soak my wood grips in simple green overnight. Maybe it would be fine, maybe it wouldn't, I don't know. But something like plastic grips or things like that can be a good, cost-effective way of cleaning really filthy, nasty, carbon buildup on 22s especially. It can work on other stuff too. But that Simple Green's a good, cost-effective product. No, I'm not sponsored by Simple Green. Make sure you get the Simple Green out of all the crevices and stuff on whatever method you want to use on that canned air, an air compressor, or some other kind of solvent to wash that stuff out to make sure you get it out. But yeah, it's a good cost-effective way to do that. That's your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. We talked about you shall take no bribe, but that's not going to be the tactical verse of the day. One of the ones that every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the heart. To do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. That is a great verse. Of course it's a great verse. It's in the Bible. It's all great, right? But just things that stand out to me. So with that, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate all that you do, and have a blessed day.